While journalists, human rights organizations, and activists are fighting a battle to expose Israel's oppression of Palestinians, there's another group in the country that's also attacked and imprisoned. Similar to Palestinian citizens of Israel, this minority group is marginalized and segregated.
And I only point this out because the various racist groups that are set up in this country by whites and who have actually practiced violence against blacks.
Do Black Lives Matter in Israel?
Are never associated or identified with the term violence.
A major rationale given for the existence of Israel is that it serves as a refuge for those who face the horrors of the Holocaust.
You see, the war of Hitler, it was a different war than the war today.
So it might come as a surprise to some that Israel is building
the largest prison of its kind in any industrialized nation.
The Israeli government's stated intention is to arrest and send all African asylum seekers to this camp, what even some Israeli officials have called a concentration camp.
The Africans who gather here come from various countries, but many are from Eritrea and Sudan.
Those escaping Sudan are fleeing ethnic cleansing and genocide in a vicious civil war. Ironically, the Israeli government has directly fueled this bloody conflict with weapons and more. But despite their minuscule size relative to the population, they're treated as a national crisis in Israeli society.
But it is making plans to take them off the streets and put them out of sight.
Go back to the country.
Well, how do you do that, though?
How do you do it? We take them with chains and put them on boats.
Tensions have grown in recent months in Israel, with protests turning violent.
A stunning 52% of Israelis concur that African migrants are a cancer.
Incidents of racist incitement by Israeli public figures doubled. The targets of their hateful invective were not Palestinians, but African migrants.
So what this means now is potential lawbreakers have the upper hand.
Netanyahu even made it clear that African refugees pose a threat to the demographic of Israel as a white Jewish state.
How much do we pay these fools?
Interior Minister Eli Yishai, he also stated Israel belongs to the white man.
Why do politicians have such low credibility today?
It's partly because there's so many problems in the world.
We stand with Israel.
Israel's at war and the United States has to support Israel.
From the perspective of the United States, I could look there and say, those black folk get in hell.
There are around 80,000 European immigrants living in Israel illegally who face no such repercussions.
They really have to question the society they're in.
And it's not just black refugees who are oppressed in Israel, but black Jewish Israeli citizens.
As an Ethiopian Jew in Israel, do you feel equal to white Jews?
Despite existing as an official state since 1948, Israel didn't start welcoming Ethiopian Jews to settle on its borders until 1973. This created the incentive for tens of thousands of Ethiopian Jews to flee to Israel to escape persecution and war in their home country.
And what they leave out is the fact that it was an extraordinary struggle to get them here, that many who are called the Falashmora are still left in Ethiopia.
Despite the fact that these black Jews of Israel are citizens of the state, which entitles them to equal protection under Israeli law, they have long been the victims of systemic discrimination.
There were Ethiopians in Israel who had been subjected to various forms of state violence because they were Ethiopian, because they were black, who called us and said, we want to form a Black Lives Matter movement here in Israel.
This might sound a lot like the Black Lives Matter movement in America, but for Ethiopian Israelis, their struggle for acceptance is complicated by both race and religion. They're facing injustice in the world's only Jewish state, even though they're also Jewish.
They've taken to the streets over the past several weeks to protest police brutality and racism in Israeli society.
Pretty much every single Ethiopian Jewish man in this country can speak to that experience.
If he was a real citizen, you'd need no more laws. You need no civil rights legislation. You have civil rights, you have citizenship. It's automatic.
They face color-based discrimination that's not unlike in the United States and other parts of the world.
The Israeli government doesn't only have laws institutionalizing this discrimination, it had been administering birth control injections to Ethiopian women without their consent. The birth rate among Israel's Ethiopian population dropped a stunning 50%. Ethiopian Jewish children were sent to Orthodox boarding schools because Israeli rabbinic authorities decided they were not Jewish enough.
Despite the fact that they were practicing forms of temple worship that had long preceded rabbinical Judaism.
When Akhenaten was kicked out of Egypt, he went into the Great Pyramid and he took the ark with him. And this is why I believe that he's really the true Moses of the Bible.
Moses, chosen by God, given the 10 Commandments. Most of the laws are based on that today.
Moses went down into Ethiopia, became known as the land of Moses. The word Cush is generally used in the Hebrew Bible to refer to a dark-skinned person of African descent.
Moses, born in Africa, was a Hebrew, an Israelite, and a black man. All Hebrews were black.
It's very extremely clear in the text.
He married a woman from Ethiopia.
And started a whole lineage.
His sister Miriam didn't like this. God was listening to this, and he said, Miriam, you have been talking about your brother Moses, slandering that he's marrying outside of his culture. And God said, that is a sin. He said, so for your punishment, I'm going to strike you with whiteness. Now, you can read all this for yourself. The whole story is in Numbers 12, starting at verse 1. So next to racism, which is a very dark thing in people's hearts, is jealousy and envy. Do not forget this lesson.
Because of persecution over the centuries in many of the countries in which they now live, and you won't believe where they are now.
The Black Jews of Southern Africa with Jewish priestly DNA, found in Zimbabwe, South Africa, and Malawi.
And in America today, you see a very large movement of African Americans who say that they're the real chosen people.
So now we're talking about the fact they literally have spread around the entire planet.
So what are they just trying to create an identity for themselves because they were slaves, or is there really something here? And the answer is, and most likely, they were the original Israelites.
These black Jews existed before the Torah. These were the original Jews.
Maybe that the Jewish people today who are white, Caucasian people came in a little bit later on.
Now you see, this is where I know that these people have been around much longer and know the history much better. Their knowledge is super ancient.
But it didn't matter because their blackness made their Jewishness illegible.
If they didn't like it, tough luck.
They don't want to tell us we're not citizens. And at the same time, they don't want to pass laws that are meaningful enough to protect us as if we were citizens.
How do you all identify?
I'm Ethiopian, then Jew, then Israeli. Because I feel like they don't want us here.
And ain't no politicians mentions it.
Whites are so hypocritical. They don't want to admit that this black man is not a citizen.
Everything is yours, so ain't nothing for us.